It's a Northwest lifestyle weekend on Como News. This is IRG's Health Talk. Back to Tom Hutler and Shannon O'Kelly.
We're back with our next guest, Wendy Flores, talking about complex trauma and her practice. And Shannon, of course, complex trauma can encapsulate a lot of things. Tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about with Wendy.
Well, we're going to talk with Wendy about people that experience trauma, mostly in childhood. You know, it's so important today, particularly this pandemic, that we start talking about mental health. More and more people are experiencing depression, anxiety, you know, all this stuff from isolation. So we're really focused on health talk here, not just talking about physical health, being able to talk about mental health and be comfortable talking about mental health. Wendy's going to talk about complex trauma.
All right, here's Shannon O'Kelly and Wendy Flores.
Wendy, welcome. How are you?
I'm great.
Wendy, thanks for joining us. I'm so excited to talk to you. And the reason I'm excited, you have a very interesting service. And tell us about what you do and your background. Let's find out about Wendy Flores right now, can we?
Well, sure. So I have a practice that specializes in complex trauma and dissociative disorders, which those two actually sort of go hand in hand because when you have complex trauma, you generally have dissociation, but a lot of the people I see have an extreme form of dissociation called dissociative identity disorder, which is what a lot of people are familiar with as the old way of calling it, which is multiple personality.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you. Yeah.
Right. What we see in the movies, right? Which is not at all accurate. The depiction that we see in the movies is really not at all accurate. But that is what I like to work with, and it keeps life interesting.
I bet it does. Wendy, I mean, tell us. I bet it does. I mean, how fascinating. I mean, you know, I think the appreciation here is the mind is a powerful tool and a very complex tool, and one that we as humans don't really know about. But tell me what complex trauma is, in your opinion, and then how that leads to a disorder. I think you described it on TV. We call it a personality disorder. You call it a dissociative disorder. Is that right?
Right. And complex trauma is not a personality disorder. Complex trauma is something that happens to us, generally speaking, when we are very, very young. And what happens is that we experience different forms of abuse, and these can be anything. These can be physical abuse, it can be emotional abuse, it can be, you know, sexual trauma, neglect, abandonment, even sort of like antipathy from our caregivers. But the point of it is that this is sustained abuse over time, generally at the hands of our caregivers.
Ooh, yeah.
And so if you think about that, the very people that are supposed to keep us alive are the people that are inflicting our abuse, which is such a strange idea for a very young developing brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you say this is a childhood thing, I mean, that occurs in childhood, you're talking about old enough to realize what's going on or have some kind of understanding that this is not right. This is trauma that I'm experiencing from my caregiver.
Actually, not even necessarily. Complex trauma can begin in the womb. So when children are exposed to, even in the womb, to parents fighting, like if there's a lot of turmoil in a parental relationship, or if there is, a lot of dysregulation in the mother, in the womb, a child can actually be born with changes in the brain that will leave that child with feelings of lack of safety. And I think that that's the key phrase that is a part of complex trauma, is the idea that if we think of ourselves as an animal, like an animal that lives out in the wilderness. That we are born without a sense of safety.
More with Shannon O'Kelly and Wendy Flores coming up next on Como.
It's a Northwest Lifestyle Weekend on Como News. IRG's Health Talk continues.
We're continuing our discussion about complex trauma with Wendy Flores and Shannon O'Kelly.
Wendy Flores, again, thank you for joining us here on Health Talk, and thank you for sharing information regarding complex trauma and then leading to personality disorder or dissociative disorder, as you called it. You have a master's in psychology, do a lot of counseling in this area. My question, though, is you described complex trauma. How would I know, or as a parent, a teacher, someone else in society know that a person has experienced this and is also presenting with this dissociative or disorders? What are the signs?
These are often lifelong symptoms, and often they don't get noticed until much later in life. And people have a lot of problems in relationships and in their jobs, because this leads to seeking out ways of not feeling. And so when we think about ways, what are the ways of not feeling? And so that can lead to alcohol abuse. It can, lead to any of the range of, addictions, right? Sex addiction, love addiction, drug addiction, and anything like that, because the body is simply trying not to feel. And that's actually where the dissociative disorders come in, because that is the body's ultimate defense. We just sort of go away in various degrees.
So basically what you're saying in a nutshell is this person is going to do things to prevent them from actually having true feelings. So they disassociate to something else than their true self, kind of. Is that what you're kind of saying?
That is right. And so what happens is we use this word fragment. The personality has fragmented in order to survive, really, because when that child's brain was small and developing, it could not integrate all of that information into one nice container, that a child with no exposure to trauma would have, or mild exposure. So it's like the brain has to form separate containers in which to store this information. This container holds this bit, this container holds this bit, this container holds this bit. And so as we grow up, and then we experience things that trigger these areas of memory, they might not be, fully formed flashbacks in the sense that we, experience the memory. It's like a cognitive memory. They might just be body memories or things that we feel in the body. So that can lead to what we would call dysregulation, which is where we have severe emotional responses to things. That causes all kinds of problems for us in life, right? That can present itself as borderline personality disorder, which has actually become quite a controversial diagnosis, because people really now are recognizing that it's really more of a trauma diagnosis.
Wendy, wow, thank you so much. Fascinating information. You know what? We are out of time, but I do want to have you back on in the near future to talk about treatment and how we can help these people. Thank you so much, Wendy, for your time. I look forward to talking again.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
That's been Wendy Flores talking about complex trauma. You can get more information at wendyflorescounseling.com. That's WNDYFLORES counseling.com. We have our next guest coming up in just a few moments. Stay with us. I'm glad to have you with us. We'll be back after this time out on Como.